Oxford. Okay. Is this the first time that we're trying to unite the colonies? No. What was the first attempt? Huh? Yeah, King.
I forget the situation, but I know it was Benjamin Franklin.
It was Benjamin Franklin, and do you remember what his plan was? It was during a war. Which war?
French and Indian.
French and Indian War. Okay. And what was the name of the plan? King should get it because where are you going?
New York.
New York.
Albany Plan of the Union. Kobe beat you to it.
There it is.
All right. Because Rochester's not too far away from Albany, right? Albany is the capital of New York State. Okay, it was the Albany Plan of Union. Okay, so let's kind of get to where, like, why is this needed? What's going on here? So we know that from Samuel Adams, sorry, not Samuel Adams. Yeah, Samuel Adams. What city was Samuel Adams based in? And therefore the Sons of Liberty were based in? Nope. Red Sox. Boston. Okay. So located in Boston. So Boston starts to become this like hotbed of resistance activity. Okay. And so the colonists are upset with the British taxes. They've started to protest a lot. And so England recognized that Boston was this hotbed. And if you're the government and you recognize a lot of resistance talk coming out of a city, what do you think you're going to do to that city? How? How are you going to show strength? Not necessarily war. You don't want to escalate it too much. Send troops. So more troops come into Boston and they patrol, right? They house. It's this physical presence that is being shown, right? And so they sent more troops into Boston to stop the protests. But how do you think that made the citizens of Boston feel? Pretty mad. Like, how do you think we would feel if there were troops in Houston? Like, I mean, Houston's pretty big, so it'd have to be a lot of troops. But like, let's say 50,000 troops coming into Houston to patrol, and they're patrolling in Humvees with a gunner. Would that make us nervous?
I live in Pearland.
Well, if it was in Houston, right?
Yeah.
Like, would you want to drive? You live in Pearland. Would you want to drive into Houston if there were 50,000 troops riding around in Humvees on 50 cals? No, right? So, the colonists living in Boston, seeing these troops, kind of, it didn't do anything to lower the tensions. It just raised them. Okay. And on the kind of flip side of that, were the troops stationed in Boston necessarily on their best behavior? No. What are soldiers trained to do?
Yeah.
Okay, kill in what context?
In war.
In war.
Oh.
War. Do soldiers make the best police officers? No. And we've kind of seen this time and time again, where soldiers are asked to be police officers, and there are several examples of them failing miserably at that. What war did we, or do we, I guess we still have a presence in this country in the Middle East? It's a 4-letter country. Iraq. Okay, so we invaded Iraq back in 2003, 2004. And one of the big scandals that came out of this was when we we beat the Iraqi army pretty quickly. And then our soldiers were put into kind of guard duty. And a group of soldiers were put into prison guard duty. And it was called Abu Ghraib prison. It became a scandal because news came out that these soldiers at Abu Ghraib were mistreating the prisoners. Like they were humiliating them, posing with stripping them down to their undergarments and posing with pictures with them. Like it was humiliation. And so big scandal, soldiers don't make the best, or police officers. And so we can see that happen here in Boston too. What document did we talk about that gave officers the ability to seize whatever? Writ of assistance. If they were given that power, do you think they're going to abuse that power a bit?
Yes.
Yeah. These soldiers were also forced to, or they forced colonists to let them stay in their home. Do you think that's going to be abused? Would you like to have the watchful eye of a government official over your shoulder, watching everything you did? That'd be kind of creepy, and you wouldn't feel free to do whatever you wanted, right? Like even the most innocent task, if someone is watching over your, how many of y'all like to read and someone's watching over your shoulder, reading over your shoulder? Does that bother people? It bothers me.
I don't read. I mean, I do.
Okay, scrolling on your computer. You're not doing anything wrong, but someone's looking over.
Mhm.
Does that bother y'all?
Yes.
Bothers me.
On my phone,
It makes
Yeah.
me think that you're
you know.
It does. It does, right? So having these soldiers in Boston, that's how the citizens felt, right? Such a large presence. So on March 5th, 1770, this is the Boston Massacre. Okay. So essentially you have British troops in the streets of Boston. It's March, it's cold. Okay. And the troops are huddled together or in a line together, and the colonists form a protest and start harassing these troops. They start off with snowballs, but that escalates from snowballs to ice because they're frozen. So like throwing ice. Does ice hurt more than snow? Yeah. Then escalates some more. Throwing rocks, small rocks and larger rocks. Is that an escalation? Are you starting to threaten the soldiers at that point? Yeah. And the soldiers, for their credit, are standing still. They haven't opened fire or anything, but the crowd gets larger and larger and larger. If you were the soldiers, what's going through your mind? Scared. Okay. Well, even if they don't have guns, Mikey, you have a rifle, but it's a musket, right? One bullet, one shot. Okay. And you have a bayonet there, so you could stab them as they come. But if the crowd gets large enough, are you going to be overpowered? Yeah. So they just start getting bigger and bigger, and eventually a soldier gets knocked down. So imagine you're standing there with your brothers in arms. Okay. Are you tense? You stressed? Okay. And then all of a sudden, out of the peripheral, you see one of your fellow soldiers drop to the floor. Has your stress level increased? Yeah.
Did the soldier die?
No.
He like tripped.
No. Well, he was knocked in the head
Oh.
with a rock. Okay. Or some other object. Okay. And so they started getting more nervous, and then at one point you hear the crowd yelling, or your soldier the crowd starts yelling, "Shoot me, shoot, fire," trying to taunt you into firing. And with all this tension and stress,
So they get shot.
the soldiers open fire. Some of them do. Okay. Now the commanding officer of the British troops there are telling them to stop firing. But you can. It's hard to fault the soldiers for firing, given all the stress around them. Okay. And as a result of firing into the crowd, 5 people die. Okay. One of them is by the name of Crispus Attucks. Is an African American. Okay. How many of y'all watched Luke Cage while it was on Netflix?
Yeah, I also love it.
Okay. So what was the name of the building or community? It was named after this guy.
Isn't it a school called Attic?
There may be.
My friend went to.
Maybe. Especially in Boston, there would be things named after this guy. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so Crispus Attucks becomes the first individual killed in what will be the American Revolution. Okay. So this is only in Boston, but news of this spreads through other colonies. Now, who do you think is going to be the bad guy as news is spread to other colonies? The British. What do we call that when the news is spread to get you to believe a certain thing? Propaganda. How many of y'all are familiar with that picture right there? Okay. So I'm actually gonna, let's see if I can zoom in on this screen. No.
Which one was the one where it was like nobody was, they were just standing there? Each side was just standing there?
Lexington and Concord.
And then all of a sudden somebody accidentally shoots and then it starts?
Yeah.
Is that a Texas war?
No, American Revolution. We'll get to that. The shot heard around the world. Perfect.
For real.
Well, it was called that. It wasn't actually. It was figurative language. Okay. So
I just think there's just like there's.
See, that's not realistic.
yeah. Anyone know who was it? Paul Revere drew this, and this is actually not the one I'm looking for.
Oh,
Yeah.
Irish on both
the one
Uh,
that used to say the British are coming.
Yeah, well, he actually didn't say the British are coming. We'll get to that. He would have said the regulars are coming or the redcoats are coming, because the colonists view themselves as British.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if Revere is going around yelling, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" Everybody is going like, "Dude, what are you talking about?" Right? Okay, yeah, this is the good one that I want. Okay, so Paul Revere was actually not at Boston when the Boston Massacre happened. So what do we call this picture? Secondary. It's a secondary source. If he had been there,
Primary.
it would be a primary. Okay. So let's take a look at this, because this is propaganda. This is not what actually took place. Can you identify the commander of the British?
Yes, he's on the very front.
He's right over here, right? And what does it look like he's doing? Commanding them to fire. So if we assume that fact to be true, which it wasn't, but let's assume that fact was true, would that make you feel remorse for the British or for the colonists? The colonists. Okay. Let's see. So you see a lot of blood down here. Okay. You also, anybody else notice what you see on this side of the page?
African American.
Well, yeah, that would be Crispus Attucks right here. Okay. Janica, what do you see? It's not a cat. It's a dog. It's a puppy. Yeah. Okay, it's a puppy. When people think of puppies, what feeling comes over them? Happiness, cuteness, innocence, right?
I also like put it on the colonist side to make them more innocent.
To make the colonists more appealing. Okay, in reality, do you think, how many of y'all have dogs? Okay, okay, okay. Maybe a goat would fit into this picture too. Okay. Okay. But if you make a loud noise around your dog, is that dog gonna just be like chilling? No.
Nah, if a goat make a loud noise, it's gonna like freeze up. What's it called?
Okay, a goat may freeze up,
They get
rigor
stuck.
mortis. Okay.
They like- they just fall
But a dog, how many of y'all like so at my ranch, you know, we shoot things, and whenever my dogs hear a gunshot, they don't run toward it and they don't stand still. They run away from that shot. Is that a reasonable reaction for a dog? Yeah.
common
So-
sense reaction.
So we look here and we know that these, in this picture, it's already shown that some guns have fired because we see the smoke in the air and we see people who have been shot. Okay. But the dog is just chilling right there. Okay. All right. So Paul Revere ends up drawing this and passing it around throughout the colonies. Copies of it get made, and it goes and spreads throughout the entire colonies. We call this propaganda. Okay. And the purpose of this was to stir up anger toward the British. Okay. Yeah. So as a result, the colonists boycott even more goods. And the British decide, okay, we're going to try to calm things down. And they decide to repeal all of the taxes except for the tax on tea.
T.
Tea. Part of the Townshend Acts, right? The Townshend Acts were taxes on glass, paper, and tea.
Oh, I know. What you're
So they repealed all but the one on tea. This is before the Tea Party. Okay.
You only drink the
'Cause-
seawater and shit.
No, it's too salty.
It tastes like tea.
Okay, so this was 1773. Oh wait, no, it wasn't. 1770. Okay, but there's still the tax on tea. Okay, so 1770, 3 years later, we get the Boston Tea Party. 3 years later from the Boston Massacre. Boston Massacre, 1770. Oh, I'm gonna close these rooms. Okay, Boston Massacre. We have it's in 1770, and in 1773 we come to the Boston Tea Party. Okay, so this was kind of a economic crisis here because the British East India Company had a monopoly on tea. Okay, and they were granted that monopoly by the British government. So in 1773, this company goes into economic hardship. Okay, they're having a hard time. So to save the company, Parliament passes the Tea Act, and this Tea Act gives the British East India Company the monopoly on tea. They now control the tea. So if you're a colonist, and what type of colonist are you?
American.
No, you're not American. You're British. Do British people like tea?
No.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. British people love tea. Okay, even today. So If now you're British, you care about your tea, and now you have to buy your tea through the British East India Company. What do monopolies tend to do to their prices? Huh? Go up. They raise them. They raise them. Okay. So, Charger, he's asking for that.
No.
Okay. So they tend to increase the price, but because the British East India Company now has the monopoly, the British Parliament actually lowers the tax on tea. Okay. Let me see how many slides were left. Okay. So we're almost done here, but I want to get through here so we can watch the clips tomorrow from John Adams. Cool? Okay. So it lowers the taxes, but the colonists are still upset. One, because the British just gave a monopoly to the East India Company. And two, because the British are still taxing them without giving them any representation.
Right.
Okay. So in 1773, three East India Company ships sail to the colonies. Okay. They first tried in New York, but they were turned away. They Philadelphia, they were turned away there. And so they ended up being forced to dock in Boston. Okay. So East India, these ships belong to the East India Company, right?
Yes.
Are they private property?
Yes.
Yeah. They're owned by a business, they're private property. On December 16th, 1773, yeah, we have colonists wait till midnight. They dress up as Native Americans, and it wasn't it was not supposed to be a convincing dress up. It was just to hide their identities. But everyone who saw them knew they were just white guys dressed up like Native Americans. Like they weren't fooling anybody. Okay. And what they did is they trespassed, if we're talking legally here, they trespassed onto these ships and threw tea overboard. Now, who did the tea belong to? The East India Company, the British East India Company. Okay, so was this a destruction of private property?
Yes.
Yeah. What would we categorize it today?
A felony.
It could be a felony depending on the price, the cost. It's not civil. You destroy
Vandalism.
property, you're not being civil. What is it, King?
Vandalism.
It's vandalism. We may even call it a riot because you're destroying private property. Yes.
When I went to Boston a couple years ago,
Uh-huh.
we went and like give an example of that. So we went on a ship and then we threw, well, it was just boxes, but we threw them overboard.
Yeah. And that's one of the weird things a little, kind of about American history. We talk about history.
They're tied to rope.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
We talk about history being written by the victors, right? So this instance, because the rebels, or we call them patriots, but from the British perspective, they were rebels. Because these people won, we look back at this point in history with favorable view where we reenact it. But if they had failed, do you think the British would have reenactments of the Boston Tea Party? No, it was a riot in their eyes. Okay. And so, but we, because we won the war, we look back at this and say, hey, this was a good thing. Okay. So it was called the Boston Tea Party. Think the British were mad at this?
Yes.
Oh yeah. And so they're like, okay, colonists, we repealed the taxes, all but tea, trying to give you, we're trying to lower tensions, and this is how you repay us. So we're done playing nice. And the British respond with a kind of a heavy hand and just try to hit back on the colonists as hard as they can. Okay. King George III is quoted to have said, we must either,
master them or totally leave them by themselves.
master them or totally leave them by themselves. So we've got to control them or wipe our hands of them. There's no getting along with them right now. Okay. So 1774, Parliament passes. What's the British version of this act, Tara? Coercive. Coercive. When you see the word coercive, what does that mean? I'm trying to coerce you. Persuade. I'm trying to get you to do what I want you to do, right? Coercive acts. That's what the coercive means. And these acts were essentially to just kind of knuckle down on the colonists. Okay. Yeah. So some of the things they did, punish them, right? Some of the things they did, they forced the colonists to house British soldiers. What amendment do we have now because of that? The third, which we never use. Yes, third is 1, 2, 3. She showed me 2 fingers. Okay. They also prohibited town hall meetings. What amendment do we have for freedom of assembly? Not 2.
10, 6, 1.
First.
I thought that was freedom of speech.
It is freedom of speech. There are 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to freely assemble, and freedom to protest the government. Okay, all in the First Amendment. Okay. So the British called these acts the coercive acts because they were trying to get us to behave a certain way. We called these acts the, anybody?
I don't wait.
We,
Intolerable.
intolerable acts.
Wow, cool.
Intolerable. What does that mean?
Not tolerant.
Not tolerated. Yeah. Like which one sounds more negative? Coercive or intolerable? Intolerable, right? So do you think this repaired any of the damage relationship? No.
It probably worsened it.
It worsened it, right? So, okay. We will end there. Tomorrow, we're going to watch some scenes from HBO's John Adams, in which it shows the Boston Massacre and talks about the Tea Party. And we'll actually watch the trial of the troops for the Boston Massacre because John Adams defended them. Huh? Was the Boston Tea Party?
Will it be like
They won't show it, no. They showed John Adams talking with his cousin Sam Adams about it, because Sam Adams is one of the ones who organized the Boston Tea Party. He was really good at roughing things up, but Sam Adams was not good at, nope, that's not what I was gonna say. He was not good at leading people peaceably. He was good at leading people in a rebellious fashion,
Malcolm X.
but yeah, kind of Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King, right? John Adams would have been more of the Martin Luther King figure and how things got done. Malcolm X was good at organizing.
We needed Malcolm X though.
Oh, absolutely. I don't disagree on that. In fact, back in California, you know who was the former or one of the former governors of California that later became president?
Joe.
Ronald Reagan. Okay. Ronald Reagan, as he was governor of California, enacted gun control laws in California. Okay. And the reason that he enacted gun control laws is because the Black Panthers from Malcolm X were walking around exercising their Second Amendment right to bear arms. And so they were walking around with guns. And so he enacted gun control legislation to prevent that from happening. Right, which today we don't really put those. We've kind of forgotten a little bit that it was Ronald Reagan who did that in California. California is known to have a lot of strict gun control legislation, but the original gun control was to prevent the Black Panthers from walking around with guns, as is their constitutional right to do.
So they can't do that.
They couldn't do that, yeah. And California continues to have strict gun laws, but
So the
now it's
violation-
no longer racially motivated as it was that first go around. So, all right, guys. Well, I will see O'Shea and King. I'll see y'all later. Okay. Bye.
I won't
Oh.
be there tomorrow.
Oh, you won't be there tomorrow. You watch the recording.
Bye, King.
Okay. Bye, Kobe.
Yeah.